Welcome to our budget transmission. I'm Umar Khalid. But the budget has been presented, the proposals have been presented, and also, the different budget targets for the fiscal year 2024-2025 have also been presented by Mohammad Aurangzeb. The speech has just ended a few moments back, and we are continuing our discussion as far as this budget is concerned. Before the budget was announced, we were discussing on the economic survey, on different important modalities around the budget. Now, of course, now that the budget is here, the proposals are here, let's concentrate around that. We've got three important guests with us. Let me introduce them to you one by one. On my very right is Dr. Mahmood Khalid, leading economist. Mahmood Saab, thank you very much to have joined us.
Thank you.
We've got Dr. Ali Salman, Executive Director of Prime. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. And finally, Syed Hassan Gilani, our economic reporter, our economic whiz, let's put it that way, from PTV World. Thank you very much, Hassan, to have joined us as well. I'll begin with you, Mahmood Saab. An outlay of 18.877 trillion rupees. And I would, before I go in different details, I'd like to discuss the budget targets that have been put forward. GDP 3.6%, inflation 12.5%, budget deficit 5.9%, primary surplus of GDP 1.1%. How do you see these figures achievable?
Yes, definitely, because if you look at the last year's budget, from that perspective, they have increased their expenditures, but they have tried to cover it from the revenue side as well. The targets which they have set in terms of the GDP is more realistic, because last time they set a target which was very high and then they had to fall back to a value which was achievable. So this time I think they have presented a better budget in terms of the budgetary forecast. As you mentioned, more than 18 trillion worth of the expenditures to be financed by around 12.7 trillion rupees of tax collection, along with 3 trillion plus of non-tax collection, and out of that close to 53% or 54% is going to be transferred to the provinces. So what we are ending up with is sort of a half budget to be financed by borrowing and half budget to be financed by the revenue what they are getting. And this is, I think, a very balanced approach, and this is in comparison to the last year.
It's a much healthier budget, if, in your point of view. Okay, Ali, coming to you. I mean, I'd like to extend what Dr. Mahmood said, and that concerns the FBR revenue. Expected is 12,970 billion rupees, 28% more than the previous fiscal year. The federal non-tax revenue target is estimated at 3,587 billion rupees. The PSDP is estimated at 1,400 billion rupees. 45% is the tariff that will be put on non-taxpayers. And of course, they also talk of circular debt in energy sector that needs to be curtailed by the usage of alternate energy. I'm coupling 2 or 3 things, but more or less it all comes back to our circular debt and how to generate the revenue. These estimates that have been proposed in the budget targets, how do you see them, and do you feel it is balanced? What is your criteria as far as that is concerned?
Well, my view is that
all right, Ali, we have to cut you short because we have to go directly to the Senate. Let's take you there.
I, Senator Mohammad Aurangzeb, lay before the Senate a copy of the Finance Bill 2024 containing the annual budget statement as required under Article 73 of the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Okay. A copy of the Finance Bill 2024 containing the annual budget statement stands laid.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Mohammad Aurangzeb, Minister for Finance and Revenue, move order number 3.
Chairman Sahab, I, Senator Mohammad Aurangzeb, move that the Senate may make recommendations, if any, to the National Assembly on the Finance Bill 2024 containing the annual budget statement as required under Article 73 of the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Of course, as you all know, discussing the budget 2024-2025 as it has been outlined and presented in the National Assembly, and now too, of course, in the Senate as well. And as I also announced, we've got 3 guests who are right here in the studios. And we will go now to our second guest, Dr. Ali Salman, Executive Director of Prime. Now, Ali, we have seen some of the budget targets. I did discuss some of the targets, and I was discussing, the revenue targets, the revenue that is expected from the taxpayers, from the non-tax payers. And I also did mention as well, the circular debt that needs to be curtailed, and for that they are going to use alternate energy measures. How do you see these figures that have been presented as far as the revenue that is expected from the taxpayers and the non-tax payers, and how can we curtail the circular debt in your point of view under the current circumstances?
Well, first of all, I think I would like to address the issue of the tax revenue target. And my submission is that once you set the revenue target, essentially, you're telling FBR that regardless of the direction of the economy, regardless of the economic growth, or how businesses are growing, you have to collect that tax. Now, what it does trigger, it triggers like a target. And then they have to collect taxes from import, from withholding taxes, from whatever resources they can use. And that is problematic in our opinion, because then we're not talking about economic growth, we're not talking about tax reforms, we're just driven by the revenue target, which in its own right, it's actually not the way to handle an economy. So in our report, which PIDE and Prime published jointly and recently, we have actually proposed a tax reform program going forward, which in which the tax rate should be uniform. We need to remove distortion. We need to reduce the exemptions, and we need to actually eliminate this filer and non-filer category, which the current budget it's still holding. So we don't see any significant reforms which have been proposed in the budget speech by the finance minister today. There are some good indications. For instance,
okay, Ali, we have to go back to Senator Ishaq, who's speaking in the Senate as we speak.
Obviously, मैंने जैसे कहा मैं लीडर ऑफ द ऑपोजिशन भी रहा हूँ और हम हमेशा बजट को लीडर ऑफ द ऑपोजिशन ओपन करते हैं. हम विल वेलकम एंड हम उनकी बात सुनेंगे.
Now, the House has stand adjourned till 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. Well, of course, the discussions on the budgetary proposals 2024-2025 are going to be discussed. Yes, I revert back to you, Ali. You were talking about reforms.
So I was referring to the speech which was made by the finance minister today, and he claimed that we have introduced corporate tax reforms for last 4 years. Now, unfortunately, we have not seen those reforms. Actually, what has happened that we have increased the tax burden on the corporate sector, and we have actually, our tax structure is moving to decorporatize our economy. So there are companies which are getting unlisted. There are companies which are going to be broken down just because they don't want to be exposed themselves to super tax, right? So these kind of measures which have been introduced over the years, there is no indication to reverse them. So, the tax rates needs to be brought down if we really are serious about increasing the tax base. This is one of the objective, settled in the speech itself. But, you are not going to achieve that if you are going to continuing to make the tax system complex and distorted as it is now.
Okay, that's your point of view. Coming to you, Hassan, how do you see the tax reforms? Because of course Ali has a differing point of view as far as that is concerned, and also there has been the announcement of the income tax break in the merged FARA districts that has been extended for 1 year period. How is that going to bode for the merged FARA districts as well? How beneficial or not is it for them? How do you see the reforms as far as the tax revenue or the tax sector is concerned?
Before coming to your question precisely, I would like to tell you that for me as an observer, one of the most fascinating and the most striking feature of this budget is the fact that we have finally now moved from a government-determined economy to a market-driven economy.
All right.
As a first step, the government has announced that onwards, the procurements are going to be taking place electronically. We have now introduced a system that is called e-procurement. Previously, not only were we wasting billions of rupees on the procurement of different items, but also the system had lots of loopholes, possibilities of kickbacks and corruption, and lots of other unfair
This
plays.
makes the system
This
more
makes the
you know,
system
transparent.
absolutely. And also the fact that as a result of the government's commitment, they are also planning to introduce a structure that aims to actually reduce government's footprint as much as possible. The finance minister has clearly stated that we are going to reduce the government expenditure, and this is of course going to augur well for the overall reduction in our fiscal deficit. That of course is a very welcome development. And you've spoken about the energy sector, so I would like to here mention that we are incurring a loss of 500 billion rupees every year on account of power pilferage. And now another problem is of course the circular debt, and the government is now finally moving to get rid of these two problems. How? By privatizing the discos. There is no room for discos in the public sector. This has been made clear by the government, and now we are moving towards the privatization of not just the discos but also the other white elephants such as PIA and also the airports. In the first phase we are going for the privatization outsourcing of the airport to generate revenue for our own self and also provide better facilities to the users. So we are finally moving towards a situation where the government is reducing and sort of decreasing its handling or control over certain entities and promoting the role of private sector, because the vision now is that the economic growth has to be led by the private sector and not the government sector.
All right. Coming back to you, Dr. Mahmood Khalid, I'll jumble up two points and then ask your opinion on it. The BAISP allocation has been increased by 27% up to 593 billion for next year under the budget proposals. Also, 1,100 billion rupees have been allocated for supporting the small and medium enterprises. How do you see these measures, and how should this money that has been allocated needs to be streamlined in order to reach the people, those who deserve it the most?
Well, in case of the first, the social protection, what they have done is that they have increased the coverage. Earlier it was less than 10 million, now it is going to be 10 million households. And within that they have also proposed that they are going to increase the cash handouts which earlier they were given. On the SME side, they have done two things. One is the direct provisioning of resources to them. Along with that, they have also increased the credit which is going to be provided through the State Bank. Now, having said that, what the objective of this is that for social protection we need to actually sort of protect the livelihoods of the most vulnerable people.
Of course.
So that means that what we are expecting in the coming future, that there is going to be some increase in the cost of doing business or cost of the living actually through inflation, or maybe some kinds of waivers, what tax concessions were given. So if it is targeted well, that is the first question. And in that, what is the main issue is that currently our BISP is based on a registry which is done after 5 years or something like that. Whereas generally speaking, the people come in out of the poverty cycle based on their economic integration, their employability and others. So what we think is that instead of having a registry based approach, it should be based on direct enrollment, in which there should be some proxy mean testing approach. Whosoever is basically has fallen into the poverty trap should be allowed to avail that facility. If not all, at least some part of it should be given to them. On the part of the SME, I think that SME sector does need some incentives, because these are our engines of growth. But until unless you solve the problems and you don't focus on these SMEs to actually grow, it is not going to help. Because if you remain small, that means that you would not come out as a business leader. You will still be producing the low value based products, and your brands would not develop.
Okay.
So we as an economist think that SMEs needs to be focused, because they are the engine of growth as well as provider of the jobs. But there has to be focus that these needs to graduate. And as Ali has also mentioned, it is primarily the tax problem, that the SMEs want to grow, but they are fearful that as they move out of their scale, they are going to be asked for registration, maybe in social security, workers welfare fund, as well as having withholding taxes, keeping the eye on the input taxes being registered or not. So many complexities actually increase for the business. So SME focus is very good, but instead of pumping more money at the same scale, there has to be some redirection that the businesses should actually graduate out towards a better brand in terms of scale, because that also helps in terms of cost of doing business and others. If that approach is not taken, still they'll remain dwarf, and that's not good for the economy.
All right, that's an interesting point of view, and let's see how that happens tomorrow. Of course, the discussion will take place, and we'll know more about what the budget outlay is and how it's all going to be distributed. Ali, you were talking about the reforms. You were talking of the reforms in the FBR. Anything? I just saw the figure: 7 billion have been allocated for reforms and digitalization as far as the FBR is concerned. At the same time, 79 billion have been earmarked for the IT sector as well. There's an IT park that is going to be established in Karachi, and my question, the reforms was just an answer to what you were talking about, but I'd like to understand the IT sector, which is quite promising as far as Pakistan is concerned. The 79 billion that have been allocated for the IT sector, how do you see this amount, and how should, in your point of view, this amount be streamlined in order for it to be maximized and the reach the reach be, to the people with the right potential?
Well, I think from a policy perspective, obviously we would want to know what is the demand from the IT sector.
Okay.
So is formation of IT parks is the top demand from IT sector?
All right.
Or are they demanding something else? So I would like to submit that one of their top demands has been opening the financial gateways. Right? So for instance, all of them depend on payments like through PayPal, which Pakistan does not have access to. Right? Also, they have demanded in the past, and to some extent we have improved and we had reformed. For instance, allowing them to keep some of their foreign exchange to use to procure the services. So IT sector has a huge potential. There is no doubt, but we need to, for instance, sign ITA, which is Information Technology Agreement. If we sign it, then it will allow duty-free import of IT and telecom equipment, which will then nourish the IT sector. It will encourage the investment, and this is a budgetary measure which I did not see. Right? So it's not it's not just building new infrastructure which would help the growth. Sometimes it actually stops and misallocates the resources, because we think that creation of new infrastructures, IT zones or cities would help, but maybe this is not the IT people want. The IT people are looking for these measures which I have just highlighted. They're also looking for some tax reliefs, which I am against. I think IT sector should be taxed uniformly like all other businesses. They should not be given any special tax treatments. They have been demanding like 1%, and I'm against it. I think government should bring them into the same tax zone or tax rates. But on the other hand, we need to listen to what they are demanding and make sure that we actually just solve their problems rather than thinking creating of new zone will have the problem.
All right, Hassan, a lot of how should I say, market talk was also there, stock talk was also there, and the stocks were moving to and fro as per the market sentiment, and the market sentiment, as per many of the analysts that I have talked to, revolves also around the deal that we are about to make with the IMF, our relationship with the IMF. How, if I were to ask you bluntly, how IMF friendly is this budget?
Well, there is always this criticism that when we are in an IMF program, IMF dictates us certain terms. Now, here we have to understand one thing, Umar, that when a country which is a least developed country goes to the IMF, whether it's Rwanda or Uganda or any other country, when they go there to seek a loan, they present to them a reforms agenda that, we are seeking loan from you, and as a result of this, we are going to do this, this, and this. But unfortunately, in the past, when we have been going to IMF seeking certain loans, we did not have a plan of our own. It is the first time that we are actually having a structural reforms agenda.
Well, if you just look at the previous programs with the IMF, there's only been the SBA that has been completed 9 months, and the program between 2013 and 2016 that was completed. Apart from that, none of the programs with the IMF.
So previously, when we sought IMF's help, we did not offer them our own homegrown agenda that, this is going to be our next plan of action. So then what happens is that when we don't have a program, then IMF tells us, now you do this. For instance, if we are not having a plan to tax the agriculture income, because we don't have the technical know-how, for instance, then IMF would tell that, okay, since you're already having sales tax and income tax and other duties, then you focus on these duties, and as a result of that, the tax rate goes up, and then there's so much hue and cry about the fact that, oh, IMF is now dictating us its terms. To avoid those dictations and those pressures, those coercions, I think the best way is that when we seek assistance from IMF or any other global lender, we need to have our own homegrown indigenous reforms agenda, like the one we did having just now.
All right. Coming back to you, Mahmood Khalid Saab, let's talk about agriculture. That was mentioned yesterday in the economic survey as well, and today as well, rupees 5 billion have been allocated to the agriculture sector for farm mechanization. I would like to understand from an economist point of view, what is farm mechanization, how would it improve the livelihood of the farmers, and what needs to be done as far as the agriculture sector is concerned?
Well, actually, agriculture serves two purposes. One, it is the food supply chain for a country. But in case of Pakistan, it's also the provider of the jobs. So if you look at the sector, they are providing, I think, close to 40% of the population's job. So from that perspective, it's really essential to increase the productivity of the sector. The problem with the agriculture sector in Pakistan, when compared with the rest of the world and even the region, that we are at almost the bottom in terms of what our yields are in terms of our crops. The problem with that is that since we don't have the quality seeds, we don't have that kind of a technology which is required for the production side. I'll give you a quick example. There were days when the laser land leveling was considered as one of the most innovative techniques. But now the world has moved on. There are systems related to how the irrigation is going to be done. There are systems related to weather forecasts. There are systems related to even sowing, cutting, and so many other things. So now the agriculture as a sector has become very mechanized, and that actually helps in two ways. One, to reduce the wastage which was created while the crops were being cut, and the second is to provide more productivity in terms of the yields which earlier were very low. So in that regard, the government had been already providing resources for the farm mechanization. Primarily the tractor was subsidized, the solar panels were installed, and some kinds of mechanized platforms were provided with the government departments actually, which were provided to the farmhouses as and when required. But on top of that, what has been added is basically the risk sharing model, in which they are gradually moving towards the insurance scheme, in which any farmer who has some threat that a possible crop may be damaged because of the weather or other issues should not basically stop from sowing that particular crop. Rather, they should go ahead and take the risk, because now the government is also going to share the risk. So in a sense, that is a very good move. But the problem again, which we have discussed earlier, that who's going to be the actual beneficiary of the system. If you look at the land holding size, the biggest landholders are the ones which get the most benefit out of these schemes.
All right.
The small farmers are the ones which are left out. So along with this, what is needed in the agriculture sector is the farming practices which should be based on a kind of a corporate system in which the community actually gets together. They develop an infrastructure which is collectively used, and that is the only way forward, because if you look at the landholding size, until unless you go for that kind of a farming practice, you would not be able to achieve both the productivity as well as the gains in terms of the cost of production.
Ali, the education sector has also been talked about. There is for the moment we have heard of the revamping of the schools in the Islamabad, in the ICT sector, and a budget has been allocated for that. Also, free meals will be provided in around 200 primary schools of Islamabad as well. Do you think this is a system that needs to be replicated to other cities as well and to other provinces? Do you think it is a measure in the right direction?
Well, I think education has to be a top priority when it comes to the human development. And since education is essentially a provincial subject, the domain of the federal government, of course, will be very limited to Islamabad. And this is a subject which probably best left to local governments and provincial governments, because their conditions can vary. There have been various models which have been already been tried and tested in Pakistan. So one is, of course, the public schooling. but 30 to 40% of enrollment round is in private sector, and this is not just elite rich school. These are also low cost, affordable private schools, which may not be offering huge playgrounds, which the government schools offer, but they are still offering education for millions of families. So we need to look into allocation of resources. For instance, there is this education vouchers program in Punjab, which has been successfully running. So what happens? Government of Punjab provides money to the parents who will then enroll their children to the school of their choice, and then the voucher is provided by the government, and then the government actually reimburses the school. Okay. So government is actually financing the education, but not directly providing it.
Understood.
So there are these models which have been, I think, successfully done in Punjab, and to some extent, I believe in Sindh also. And so we need to explore all these models to make sure that we have education landscape which is offering reliable education, and especially the out of school children needs to come back to the school, because this is where the primary responsibility of the government comes in. If you ask me, higher education, more than the higher education, we need a high quality school education,
and also good technical education for it to cater to the needs of all the countries that are in
good quality education.
Yes. Absolutely. All right, Hassan, I'd like two important points. The first concerns the power generation. We talked about the renewable power generation, how the government wants to promote that. Sure. And there were a lot of question marks in the industry as well as to whether the solar energy is going to be taxed further as far as budget. Has there been anything said as far as that is concerned? Also, there have been, the numbers is 5 billion that has been allocated for revamping the power transmission, as well as 206 billion that have been allocated for water resources.
Absolutely.
How do you see these two figures? Yep. And I'd also like to understand this these rumors that were circulating that the users of solar or an alternate energy source are going to be taxed more.
Yeah. Well, as of now, there hasn't been any development related to taxing those who are using the solar panels. And as far as the energy sector is concerned, it is very significant that in the PSDP this time, the energy sector has the largest chunk of allocation, which manifests how important we are attaching to this important sector. As you mentioned, the amount of billions of dollars, energy sector has the highest allocation, followed by water. And of course, this is auguring well for the fact that at present we are having more than 50% reliance on fossil fuels, on the import of oils. Of course, we spent a huge chunk of money in terms of foreign exchange. Now we are promoting our reliance on hydel as well as solar and other, of course, alternative energy resources. And this is exactly why the government has allocated this amount of billions of dollars on account of energy generation, energy development, followed by 206 billion rupees for construction and remodeling of dams, which of course is also going to be contributing towards production of hydel energy and will resultantly reduce our reliance on the expensive sources of fossil fuels.
All right. Yeah. That's interesting. Would anybody want to add to this?
Yeah, I would.
I know you will.
Yeah. Because when we say that the energy mix is going to change and we are shifting towards hydel, the problem which we see from outside is that the IPPs had certain commitments with the government in the name of the capacity charges. So whenever you are not actually buying from them, actually you are going to pay to them without any purchase. So that is actually a cost to the government. So having energy mix which is more towards the green side is definitely good. Okay. And this is what the government strategy is about. In this budget, they have also announced that they are going to have a climate finance strategy which is going to be developed up to October. So in that they are looking for those projects actually which can get us some carbon credits, because that's the way
they are looking at a climate financing strategy.
Exactly. So from that perspective it's good, but you also have to really consider that what's the solution for the IPP's capacity charges, because if you go clean and green and you're not buying fossils based energy from them, that means the payments which you have to make to them, that is going to increase. So there has to be some solution which should also have been proposed along with that. If that is not there, still one question remains unanswered, that then how you are going to resolve the circular debts and the differences between what we are paying and what you're collecting from.
All
the
right. Ali,
customers.
our minister, while presenting the budget, talks about structural reforms. And I'll quote what he said. He says, structural reforms are the need of the hour to transform the country into a market-driven economy. So my question is two-pronged. Market-driven economy, what needs to be done? Structural reforms, what needs to be done?
Well, first of all, if we go by the statement, these are music to my ears.
Okay.
So I'll be very happy to read a budget by a finance minister who would say that we are going to transform from a state to market-oriented budget. That is
Market-driven.
economy, market-driven economy. That's what we have been talking about for a long time. So let's think what needs to be done. So first of all, we need, certainly, I think it's highlighted in the budget. I would like to acknowledge that he made a very clear statement that government needs to exit from business.
Yeah.
So this was stated very clearly, and we endorse this statement, and we hope that there is political commitment to it, there is political resolve to actually make it happen, because for instance, People's Party has already gone on record opposing this move towards privatization. For an economy to make transition from the state to market. The SOEs, there are 86 commercial SOEs, they are non-strategic in nature. They have 50% of assets in a national economy. They need to be all privatized as soon as possible. They are dragging the resources.
All right.
Secondly, the regulatory infrastructure, again, this is mentioned in the budget, but we need to see how it's going to happen in the future. Needs to thoroughly revise and restructure, and I'd like to acknowledge the PIDE work, and I think Mahmood can talk more about the series on the sludge. There's extensive research is already done, and I wish the government is benefiting some of this research which has been produced by Pakistan's own think tanks. And thirdly, for this transition to happen, we need tax reforms. Without which we cannot actually have sustained economic growth. I do not see much attention being paid to the taxation reforms in this budget, and I see, unfortunately, the same trend have been followed, increasing the withholding taxation rate, increasing the GST rate, for instance, have been mentioned. These are not good measures, and these are not going to be helpful for driving the economy. Ultimately, you need private sector. You need these 3 or 4 million enterprises which exist in Pakistan. We need them to grow. They are not going to go to India and Bangladesh tomorrow.
Of course.
We need them to grow. We need them to become big companies.
All right.
How to make them big companies, that should be the main focus of.
Let's see what the discussion in the coming days in the National Assembly leads to, and of course in the Senate as well, because these discussions will continue, and tomorrow is going to be there's going to be a post-budget meeting as well. Let's see how our finance minister also answers the different queries. I'm sure a lot of people will have the same queries as the both of you have had. Lastly, Hassan, we're short of time, so this is going to be my last question to my guests. Looking at the budget from an overall perspective, what would your major comments be as far as the budget is concerned? As for the layman who does not understand facts and figures, who does not understand reforms or the process, what is the message for the common man who wants to know what does the budget have for Pakistan and how is Pakistan going to move forward in the next 12 months?
Right. It's very essential and imperative to note, Umar, that we have set a growth target of 3.5 or 6 billion, 3.5 or 6% for the next fiscal year for our economy to grow. In the outgoing fiscal, we have seen a growth of nearly 2.321%. The point is that at the same time, we have also seen a population explosion. Since 2017, we have seen a population explosion of 16%.
Okay.
And in the outgoing fiscal year, we have seen the population increase by 3%. So the point is that even if we are able to achieve the growth rate of 2 or 3%, it is going to be completely offsetted by the fact that we have also grown population-wise by 3%. So we need to also make sure that we increase the growth rate also in tandem with the population, because if we are not having a lower population or a controlled population rate, then of course we cannot enjoy the fruit of economic growth. And also I would say that the budget proposals seem determined to be making sure that the tax to GDP ratio, which is only 9% at the moment, is increased. The richer and the untaxable pay more taxes, and of course there is increased streamlining and betterment of the mechanism to collect taxes. Now there is a clear distinction drawn between the filers and the non-filers. Non-filers will now be paying taxes slab liable to 40 to 45%. This clearly draws a distinction and also sort of motivates the non-filers to come towards the tax net and get themselves registered and contribute towards the economic development, because as the finance minister has said that there are no sacred cows in this country. Every sector, every individual has to pay tax and has to contribute towards the economic development.
All right, I'd end with the term sacred cows, and of course the statement that was recently made. I think our two eminent analysts would also agree with the fact that we need to have a system that is streamlined to include every single sector, and there should be no sector that should be left out, and an equal opportunity needs to be given to everybody, and at the same time measures need to be taken so that no sector is left behind. Thank you so very much, Dr. Mahmood Khalid. Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Salman and Syed Hassan Gilani, to have joined us for this part of our transmission. This transmission continues, ladies and gentlemen, during the course of the evening as well, and you'll see more and more discussions as far as the budget and those budgetary targets and proposals that have been made. Umar Khalid, but busy farewell. Allah Hafiz.